Asta's new and final anti-magic sword might have been hidden inside his Grimoire from the beginning. It's just waiting for Asta to understand his true magic ability, which he inherited from his mother. To store objects without magic and other objects and to pull them out. There are many clues in Black Clover that support this idea. For example, the fact that the anti-magic swords were already altered by anti-magic even before Asta found them points towards the idea that someone pulled them out after Liebe was already sealed. Let's talk about it. When discussing Asta's power-ups in Black Clover's anti-magic swords stand out, serving as Asta's primary tools in combat. On average, Asta gets a new sword roughly every 100 chapters, which translates to about every 2 years in real time. This pattern of course excludes the first 2 swords he obtained. The reason for this is that the creator of Black Clover needed to equip Asta so he could hold his own against the basic magic knights at the start of the series. After that, the pattern was to introduce a new sword approximately every 100 chapters, which has occurred twice so far and definitely once every saga. First the Elf Saga, then the Devil Saga, and now the Ultimate Wizard King Saga. It's evident that since these swords are central to Asta's battles, he will eventually acquire a final sword for the final saga of Black Clover, hence a final sword is inevitable. Notably, we're already 7 chapters past the 100 chapter average when Asta is usually due for a new blade. This timeline coincided with the emergence of Balnacio, including Baal, the supreme blacksmith devil of the Cliffeth. Baal, recognized as the creator of all weapons, particularly swords, presented the ideal moment for Asta to receive a new sword. While it may appear that Asta hasn't received it unless he chooses to use the paladin sword Baal wielded, I believe this only further indicates that Asta will eventually get a new sword very soon. To grasp this, we need to dive into the mindset of a manga creator. Tabata knows demonology better than anyone. He's aware that Baal is seen as the master of all weapons and the origin of blacksmiths. Therefore, he also realizes that fans of Black Clover will naturally expect Asta to get a sword during a confrontation with Baal. If Asta isn't meant to receive a final sword, then the manga creator would likely avoid a battle between Baal and Asta, especially one involving the summoning of a sword. Clearly, Tabata feels secure creating such a scene without seizing the chance to present Asta's final weapon. This likely means he already has a plan in place for how and when it will be introduced, so it doesn't matter and he doesn't have to avoid the confrontation. There's already a much better way for Asta to receive the final weapon, so we won't be disappointed. Now that the Balnacio theory didn't work out, there's another theory to consider. It's the Beelzebub Devil Angel theory, suggesting that Baal might return as an angel, giving Asta another opportunity to get a new sword. Last time I also explained the dwarf theory, and I touched upon the idea that Asta's final sword might have always been with him, hidden inside the 5-leaf Clover Grimoire. That's the main focus of today's video. Firstly, Asta's Grimoire was originally a sword magic grimoire. But what exactly is sword magic? It's certainly not what Asta does with his swords right now. He's not using anti-sword magic, or at least it hasn't been confirmed. After all, Zagra didn't transform Patri's Grimoire into a demon light magic grimoire. Instead, he utilized the grimoire for his own magic ability, word magic. He didn't acquire Patri's magic ability. That would make sense. Thus, it's illogical to assume that Asta can use a magic ability previously bound to the 4-leaf Clover sword magic grimoire. Applying this already established system to Asta, it would imply that Asta should harness his own magic attribute. Just because whatever he does seems related to swords doesn't necessarily mean it is. Magic inheritance is genetic. If we speculate that there's something unusual about Asta's birth, given that no one could have a child with Lysita without either sacrificing themselves or having no mana themselves, the most logical deduction is that while Asta might lack mana production in his body, making him unable to use his magic, he still genetically inherited the ability to use the magic he inherited if he had mana like everyone else. The best comparison is a gun without bullets. Just because you have no bullets doesn't mean you don't have a gun. You still possess the gun, you just need someone to provide the bullets, like for example Liebe and his anti-magic. In Asta's case, his magic will be the ability his mother used to store magicless items and other items. But without mana, he could never harness that. However, in the Land of the Sun, we discovered that Asta doesn't need mana to wield magic. His anti-magic, which he receives from Liebe, serves as an ideal substitute for mana. This enables Asta to produce effects similar to those of the Magic Knights. For example, Asta has already hinted at the capability to form an anti-magic skin, and he copied Licht's ultimate magic using anti-magic and shared his anti-magic with others. Since anti-magic lacks mana, and others are like items, it's similar of how Lysita stored Liebe inside the bottle. It was never specified that the container for the magicless thing must also be without magic. Only the thing to be stored needs to be magicless. So a body should theoretically be possible as well, and that's exactly what his demon form is, or whatever he did to the Black Bulls. They absorbed Asta's anti-magic to activate their unique magical abilities, validating what I've always emphasized. Anti-magic doesn't necessarily negate magic. Thus, anyone using anti-magic can manifest their magic but source differently and with slightly altered attributes. If this holds true as evidenced in the recent chapter with the Black Bulls and previously with Zedden, it suggests that Asta indeed possesses the capability to use his own magic, inherited from his mother through anti-magic. That is, he can store magicless items within other items. Revisiting the last chapter and considering Ryu's theory, which might be a red herring again since we, like Ryu, assume all of Asta's abilities stem from anti-magic. We simply overlook the possibility that Asta might be utilizing his mother's magic with anti-magic in place of mana, without noticing it. Ryu proposed that one characteristic of anti-magic seems to be its ability to turn things into anti-magic versions. However, nowhere is it mentioned that anti-magic can be stored within other things. One can't simply place something inside another, especially if it lacks mana for manipulation. Such an action requires a distinct magical ability. If this were easily achievable, then everyone would possess this capability, making Lysita's magic ability useless. One might argue that anti-magic isn't just anything, it's a force that Asta and Liebe control. By that reasoning, everyone should be capable of sharing their mana with others. If that were truly the case, they would have long since shared it with Asta and his magic sword, yet such an event has only occurred spontaneously. Given that mana is the counterpart to anti-magic, they should have similar behaviors. If Asta can effortlessly infuse objects with anti-magic, then others should be able to put their magic back into the swords, reverting their state. Yet no one has demonstrated such capabilities. There's a reason it's termed Dark Cloaked Blade and not merely Dark Blade. Ordinary individuals can't just infuse their magic into their swords. They must envelop it or create a magic sword. Asta fundamentally altered the katana by imbuing it with anti-magic. The sole reason the katana became part of Asta's collection is likely because Tabata aimed to illustrate that Asta's ability to use the swords is not due to the swords themselves, but rather something unique to Asta. Licht is the only non-individual capable of reverting the swords back to magic swords with a mere touch. What does this mean? If the sword originated from the Grimoire created by Licht and then turned into eternal swords because of the five-leaf transformation, then they would not belong to Licht anymore, and therefore he could not turn them back, unless it's because he possesses sword magic, enabling him to imbue any physical sword with his sword magic mana. Alternatively, the swords might have been specifically crafted with certain attributes. This seems more plausible, especially since Asta can utilize the sword similarly to Licht, even without having sword magic. This proves that mere sword magic can be the explanation. Considering all this, when a magic genius like Julius attempted to wield the sword, it absorbed his magic, contrasting the effect Licht demonstrated. Julius even remarked that he couldn't use it, suggesting he might have tried and failed. If everyone potentially could but lacked the knowledge, it still doesn't explain how Asta instinctively knew to harness the sword's power. Asta merely touched the sword just like Licht. Yami, however, couldn't revert the katana, discovering that Asta had essentially broken it. This suggests that Yami couldn't cloak it due to the overpowering anti-magic. Yet if Licht were to touch the katana, it's plausible that it could revert to its original state. Thus, if Julius could manipulate the magic sword and Yami couldn't alter the physical katana, something about Asta and Licht must be special. This could also explain why he seems capable of storing swords within the Grimoire, much like Lysita stored Liebe inside it. And all this supports the fact that it was never mentioned that Licht created the three magic swords, which means there might be one more. We know that when a magic user dies, all their magic disappears. When Licht passed away, all his swords should have vanished. It's reasonable to speculate that the swords inside the Grimoire, when it transformed into a five-leaf clover, might have become permanent. However, we are aware that two of the swords weren't inside the grimoire unless, of course, someone, like for example the individual who handed Lisuta the 5-leaf Clover grimoire before her encounter with Liebe, presumably the same person who retrieved the grimoire following her death and delivered it to the grimoire tower, took those swords out. This person might have initially left one in the dungeon and then positioned the other sword where the elves could discover it. Considering all three swords had already transformed into anti-magic weapons, whoever had the grimoire must have taken the swords after Liebe's sealing. The crucial point is the remarkable coincidence of Asta arriving at the exact location where the sword was and then acquiring it. Twice. It's clear that someone must have known Asta would end up in those specific locations to find the swords. This strongly suggests Astaroth's involvement. However, this implies that when Astaroth picked up the grimoire, Lisuta must have still been alive. This is because she would have had to remove the swords from the grimoire, which she had previously placed inside. After she sealed Liebe, he corrupted the swords. Thus what she retrieved were two anti-magic swords. Now we come to the final sword. If Licht got the three swords from the dwarves, which according to mythology is what they do, gifting powerful weapons to the mightiest warriors for protection, then it implies that at that time only three swords existed, or Licht only got three for some reason. It will also explain why only Licht can use them, because they might have been created only for him. The fact that Licht's elf tribe had contact with the dwarves is confirmed because Elfril mentioned recognizing Charmy as a dwarf. We know elves can read ki. The fact that he knows what dwarves feel like indicates they had contact. After the elf massacre, the dwarves, unaware of the devil situation, lost trust in humans and vanished. But that doesn't mean they stopped making swords. If anything, they might have been motivated to create at least one more, given that the other three were gone. And if it's all about Astaroth, then he surely knew about the dwarves as well as the origins of the swords. And the location of the dwarf kingdom, whether it's underground, in a mountain, or above the four kingdoms. For Astaroth, location wouldn't be an issue, he would find them anywhere. If he truly prepared Asta to face Lucis and arranged for Asta to receive specific items in the right moment to become stronger, there are only two scenarios. Both share one thing. Asta approached the dwarves, asking them to craft a weapon more potent than any sword they have ever forged. This weapon now exists, awaiting Asta's claim. It might be with the dwarves, who will eventually appear and give the sword to Asta, or it could simply be in a location Asta is destined to visit in upcoming chapters. However, due to Lisita's involvement, there is also a possibility that the weapon is already inside Asta's grimoire, and is just waiting for Asta to realize his true magic ability, and with it, deem himself worthy to wield it. What do you think of this theory? Let me know in the comments. If you want to see more Black Clover content, then subscribe to this channel with the notification bell activated. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye.